Hey guys, welcome back to the Cold Comfort Podcast with me, your host, Paul Boyven. So I know it's been a while. Had a kid, almost had a fire in the studio, adversity, shit happens, we're back. Trying something new today, actually a couple of things new. One, I've got video, so I've got a camera set up here and I'm going to see if I can figure out how to sync the audio and video, and possibly will be up on YouTube. Otherwise, you can still catch me on Spotify, just like normal. The other thing I'm going to try today is a book review. So a lot of you guys know that I've started, or continued my reading from that 75 Hard program, and today I was just thinking, I would like to share some information with you guys from one of the books that I read, especially if you're a father of boys. I would definitely recommend this book. It is called The Boy Crisis by Dr. Warren Farrell and Dr. Gray. This is the book here if you're needing to look at it. There's a whole bunch of tabs in there, and hopefully I can kind of make sense of this stuff. So I guess we'll start out with a quick introduction of the author. So Dr. Warren Farrell is a PhD in political scientist, Jesus Christ. We'll have to edit some stuff out here. Let's start again. Dr. Warren Farrell is a political scientist, activist, and author of 7 books on men's and women's issues. He's also the leading figure in the men's rights movement. Farrell initially came to prominence in the 70s as a supporter of the second wave of feminism, serving on the board of the National Organization for Women, or NOW. He received his Bachelor of Arts from Montclair State University in Social Sciences in 1965. In 1966, he received a Master of Arts from UCLA in Political Sciences and a PhD in the same category in 1974 from New York University. So, that's just basic general overview of the author. A lot of that, easily find that on Wikipedia. So basically, I'm going to go, like I said, I've got a bunch of tabs here, and I might read a little bit from the book and then give my thoughts on what he's got to say, or maybe I can kind of relate it to what I've got going on in the household here. So without further ado, now I basically skipped the whole introduction, and there is some valuable information in there. So if what I do here with this book for you kind of gets you, spikes your interest in getting the book. He does go through a few things in the intro. Sorry. Let me just grab a sip of water here. So chapter 1, or part 1, sorry, is there really a boy crisis? In here, chapter 1, he starts out the crisis of our son's mental health. And honestly, it's, it starts out a little drab, right, or a little down. The first thing he mentions is murder and suicide. So from the book here, when a boy drives down the serpentine road of mental health, feeling depressed and isolated because he feels no one who knows the real him loves him, no one needs him, and there's no hope of that changing, he may one day find a cliff and drive off. That choice may be direct, as with suicide, or it may be indirect, as in school shootings. School shootings are homicides that are also suicides. Even if the boy doesn't end his own life literally, for all practical purpose, his life is still ended. The rate of mass shootings has tripled since 2011. We blame guns, violence in the media, violence in our video games, and poor family values. Each is a plausible player. But our daughters live in the same homes, with the same access to the same guns, video games, and media, and are raised with the same family values. Our daughters are not killing, our sons are. The murder-suicide combination of school and other mass shootings is largely young white boys. Is largely young white boys' way of driving off the cliff at the end of mental health's tortuous road. Consider the 3 of the most notorious white male shooters: Adam Lanza from Sandy Hook, Elliot Rogers, UC Santa Barbara, and Dylan Roof Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston. Suicides increase as the pressures of male role and hormones increase. Before puberty, the suicide rate among males and females are about equal. However, between 10 and 14, boys commit suicide almost at twice the rate of girls. Between 15 and 19, boys commit suicide at 4 times the rate of girls. And between 20 and 24, the rate of male suicide is between 5 and 6 times of that of females. So, wow. Right, like if that does get your attention, whew. Now, a main comment that I would like to make is a lot of these facts are related to the States. Canada definitely does not have the mass shooting problem and statistics, as tragic as that statistic is. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a gun owner, and yeah, every time I see one of those shootings, it's heart-wrenching. Wow, so this might be a harder episode than I thought. In my experience with depression, I can definitely relate to the feeling. In my experience with depression, I definitely can relate to feeling the pressures of our role as men, pressure to provide, protect, set an example. It's hard when you feel isolated and burdensome. I found my depression and substance abuse ended when I started putting myself first. Now, I don't mean that in the sense of doing what I wanted when I wanted. I mean actually showing up for myself. So I mean that's definitely a place to start. Definitely as an adult, as a father, you definitely have to take matters into your own hands sometimes and realize that if you're not helping yourself first, you're not going to be around to help your boys. So, let's go back to the book. Just bear with me, I'm finding this little section here. Skips along into chapter 4 here, the crisis of our son's education. Worldwide reading and writing skills are 2 of the biggest predictors of success. These are also the 2 areas in which boys fall behind the most. In the United States, by 8th grade, 41% of girls are at least proficient in writing, while only 20% of boys are. Many boys used to turn around in about their junior or senior year of high school, anticipating the need to become sole breadwinner, and therefore gain familial pride, peer respect, and female love. They got their act together. The expectation of becoming sole breadwinner became his purpose. No longer. In one generation, young men have gone from 61% of college degree recipients to a projected 39%. Young women from 39 to a projected 61. Complete flip. The number of boys who said they didn't like school has increased by 71% since 1980. Boys are also expelled from school 3 times as often as girls. I mean, and I can relate. I definitely didn't enjoy school. Like, shit, I'm basically doing a book report today. And my mom did all my book reports for me. So, again, bear with me, because this is, pardon me, this might be painful. Anyway, back to the book. With all those statistics, he asks why. In a study of boys and girls in the United States at the primary level, when it comes to standardized tests versus grades, quote here, boys who perform equally as well as girls on reading, math, and science tests are graded less favorably by their teachers. Weird. Interestingly, the boys who behaved in the classroom in ways the study identified as more commonly associated with girls, for example, being attentive and eager, did receive grades equal to girls who scored equally in standardized tests. Boys may feel teachers are discriminating against their boy-style behavior, which understandably leads them to like school less. I have actually a couple of tabs here that I'm basically just going to read all together. So this is a little tab underneath chapter 4, the infinite consequences of uneducated boys. While boys who are motivated can become many of society's most constructive forces, becoming inventors and implementers of what they invent, the Amazons, Apples, Facebooks, Microsofts, and Googles, boys whose energies are poorly channeled can become society's most destructive forces, are serial killers and prisoners. And he goes on in that same section, I believe. Yes, he's in the same section, and it's called the dropout left-out cycle. So there's kind of 4 stages to it. In neighborhoods where marriage is scarce, fathers are scarce, and more than half of boys don't finish high school, the boys drop out. The less education a young man has, the more likely he is to be unemployed or underemployed. He's left out of the workplace. Women who desire children think of an uneducated man as undesirable and an unemployed man as another child, hardly marriage material, therefore he's left out of marriage and fathering. Some of the women with whom he nonetheless has sex become pregnant. Some of the women with whom he nonetheless has sex become pregnant and raise children without him. Thus we're back to step 1, the left out dad and the dropped out son. I put in my notes here, no need for comment, but to be honest, rereading that, it's one of those downward spirals. We're just creating more of the same problem. You see it more and more. Fatherless homes are more common these days. And to be honest, he goes on in here, and you can, by the end of this book, you can actually realize that it's one of the biggest problems that's affecting our young boys, is fatherless homes. So in chapter 8 here, he talks about the path to purpose, and I do have some notes there, just so, again, back to the book here. The power of purpose. The Japanese call it ikigai, or a reason for being. Japanese men with ikigai are less likely to die of heart disease, and both sexes live longer. Whether we call it ikigai or sense of purpose, when we pursue what we believe gives life meaning, it gives us life. Pardon me. So, how do you bridge the gap? For starters, by exploring with your son ways that he can serve by finding a purpose larger than himself. The alternate is a purpose void, often triggering a failure to launch and its collateral damage, depression, and self-disgust. I also find that it'll probably lead to some serious entitlement. So helping your son develop his sense of purpose requires beginning at a very different place than his dad or granddad. His dad or granddad was told his sense of purpose. Your job is to help your son find his sense of purpose. Your dad's sense of purpose began with giving up what created that glint in his eye, whereas your son's sense of purpose must begin with finding the glint in his eye. So that's something that definitely, like I said, kind of hit hard for me. as I mentioned again in my intro episode, if you've been listening that long, or if you're just tuning in, I did mention that I see a lot of entitlement these days. And I mean, I don't know, is it maybe just that I'm getting older, but it's, definitely the last 5 years. It's definitely gotten worse. Now, how do you change that? Like you said, find a purpose that's bigger than yourself would be a good place to start. So, and I'm not going to take credit for this idea, and I just heard it and I thought, hey, maybe that's something that should be possibly considered. There's a lot of countries out there that have a mandatory, say a 2-year minimum where you are, you serve in the military. No, I'm not necessarily meaning that you would have to do military service as much as that might do you some good, probably teach you some discipline. There's all sorts of other forms, law enforcement, fire, paramedic, those are the obvious ones. What about, working out, helping and volunteering at a local food bank, or as a mentor, someone younger, less experienced, There's definitely a couple of things that I'm interested in exploring myself. Yeah, we'll go from there. So, number 6 here. Boys who hurt us. Oh, sorry. Chapter 13 is Dad Deprived Boys, is what it's called. So, how much of this am I supposed to read? I don't know. I guess my notes aren't that great. Dad Deprived Boys. Depriving a child of his or her dad is depriving a child of part of his or her life. That is, findings published in Pediatrics in 2017 concluded that at 9 years of age, children with father loss have significantly shorter telomeres. Telomeres in our cells are what keep our genes from being deleted as our cells divide. As the National Academy of Sciences reports, telomere length in early life predicts lifespan. How much damage to life expectancy is created by dad deprivation? Children with father loss already have, by age 9, telomeres that are 14% shorter. However, when compared to girls, the telomere damage from father loss is 40% greater for boys. Wow. Dads, like moms, air and water are essential to our lives, but we've tried to live without dads. We haven't tried to live without moms, air, or water. Why is it that in a generation producing some outstanding young men, whether a boy in crisis or leading us out of a crisis is significantly influenced by whether he is dad deprived or dad enriched? Dad enriched boys tend to fill the purpose void with constructive new senses of purpose. Dad deprived boys are more likely to either drown in their purpose void or fill it with destructive senses of purpose. Our daughters are also either damaged by dad deprivation or empowered by dad involvement on many more measures than lifespan alone. But the impact on boys is proving considerably greater, not only during their childhood and teenage years, but throughout their lives. This is true not only of boys' economic future, but also of boys' emotional intelligence and marital potential, all of which are inextricably connected. Whether because of the slower maturation rate of boys' brains or poorer social skills, socialization, our sons are more vulnerable than our daughters. And when boys are hurt, they hurt us physically, psychologically, and economically. So he goes on here to talk about boys who hurt us. A study of ISIS fighters concluded that almost all had in common some type of absent father syndrome. You know, so, I mean, just what I read should be serious enough to be a wake-up call. Like I said, he goes on to talk about mass shooters, ISIS. He even actually mentions the Hitler Youth. He also mentions how dad-deprived boys are victimized by people of authority at a rate much higher than those whose dad is present and active in the raising of his son. So I'm going to skip up here to another section, and bear with me because, yeah, this one might get me a little emotional because I can relate. Wow, here we go already. So being a stepfather, I definitely just kind of, like I said, took interest in this section. So, let's see, what is the name? Anyway, there's a section called Stepdad or Bio-Dad. Does it make a difference? So, your son's chances of becoming a step-parent are at least 6 times greater than your daughter's. Why? Some 86% of families with a step-parent consist of a stepdad and a biological mom. Step-parent homes aren't rare. An estimated 1/3 of children will live in a step-parent home before the age of 18. Wow. So whether your son is living, with a stepdad, or somebody becomes a stepdad, or someday becomes a stepdad, you're teaching him how to navigate the stepdad minefield can be a gift to multiple generations. Let's start with some potential good news for and about stepdads. First, remember, an involved dad triggers his dad brain, whether the child is biologically his or not. Second, a new stepdad almost always wants to support his new wife and looks forward to being of value in the lives of his stepchildren. Third, most moms want new stepdads involved, especially with their sons. Fourth, and this one I've got underlined, closeness with a stepdad decreases the likelihood that an adolescent boy's own marriage will someday end in divorce. And fifth, if the stepfamily is long-lasting and stable, the chances of the children adjusting are good. I apologize. Like I said, this section hits me hard because I'm also a stepfather. And damn, do I try. So, let's get over that. The bad news begins with the fact that most step families are not long-lasting and stable. The divorce rate of step families is 65 to 70%. Stepfather involvement rarely reaches beyond the level of advisor. Stepdads usually become a hierarchical dad or a conditional dad, becoming equally involved only when he fathers the way mom wants him to father, or what he says here, what mom feels a good father, or how a mom feels a good father should father. We'll explore that dynamic just below, but here's the results. After 2 years of marriage, most stepfathers are minimally involved and have little rapport with control over and discipline of their stepchildren. When this happens, it undermines all 5 items in the good news category. So understanding that this process is predictable makes it less personal, but the real goal is to make the step-family work, so that your son is more likely to receive the contribution of his stepdad, or to make a full contribution should he become a stepdad. Here's a GPS to the most precarious portion of the stepdad minefield, the slippery slope to the hierarchical or conditional dad. And he goes on, to talk about, there's another 4 steps kind of idea, and he breaks them all down kind of thing. But, like I said, the good news part, I can 100% relate with. I'm not really trying to brag at all, but I've definitely treated my son as my own. See, there it is right there. I definitely have tried to always treat my stepson as my own. Honestly, I don't even like the term stepson. Clearly, I just dropped the step right there. I just, when you're constantly saying my stepson, you're just automatically, I guess you're automatically a little bit more detached from them. So just call him your son or daughter, right? What's the difference? I guess that's a good segue to the second part, the bad news part, where he says, what does it say? Where do I have it? Stepfather involvement rarely reaches beyond the level of advisor. Again, like I said, how can you truly embrace a child that's not yours when you're constantly calling them your step whatever? If you say something long enough, you believe it, right? Sort of an indoctrination. So just call him your son or your daughter. I feel you'll just get closer that way. Again, I probably should have stuck to my notes on that one. Lesson learned for the future here. So, chapter 16, what dads do differently. I'm going to hit, a couple small little sections here. There's probably 3 of them. Yeah, so, again, bear with me. I'm doing my best here, guys. Dads and moms both love their children deeply, but differently. Again, this chapter is chapter 16, what dads do differently. They have different ways of setting boundaries and enforcing boundaries, exploring in nature, roughhousing, creating teachable moments, challenging the kids' limits, using hangout time, and different attitudes towards testing. Boys with poorly enforced boundaries also become boys with poor impulse control. When the University of Chicago Crime Lab examined why 610 Chicago public school students were shot by fellow students during a recent 1.5-year period, they found that lack of impulse control and a lack of conflict resolution and social skills were characteristic of the boys involved. However, what the study missed was that impulse control and social skills are some of the gifts of father involvement, and these boys' fathers were mostly absent. He goes on to talk about who the child is ultimately better off with if there's, shared parenting or custody. Oh, that's actually in my next set of notes. So, whoops. Again, he's got a couple little stats here as well that I'd like to share. Children living with dads are less likely to have discipline problems. This is despite the fact that dads are less likely than moms to use physical discipline, which was, yeah, whoa, would not expect that. 5 to 11-year-old children with moms, primarily in mom's custody, are 259% more likely to go to the hospital. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I do know why because I've read the book, but it's, look into it yourselves, guys. It's some pretty shocking numbers right there. In the event of divorce, so this is where I was getting a little bit ahead of myself. In the event of divorce, the 4 must-dos. Equal time. Children have approximately equal time, including overnights with each parent. No bad-mouthing. Neither parent bad-mouths the other in a way that the child can detect, either verbally or non-verbally. Either examples, eye-rolling and emotional withdrawal. Proximity. The parents live close enough to each other that the child does not need to forfeit friends or activities to see either parent. Counseling. Consistent couples counseling occurs even when there is no emergency. It goes on, like I said, to talk on who ultimately the child is better off with, like in the primary, who the child is ultimately better off with primarily if shared parent or custody isn't possible. The result was surprising, not what a lot of you would guess, and I honestly would have guessed mom as well, but it turns out it's dad. There's a subsection in here. Now, did I fold the page? Right here. Dad versus being a victim. And it gives a couple of examples. Kids living only with dad were less likely to have problems related to feeling like victims. So they were 1/3 as likely to feel victimized by peers, half as likely to have frequent nightmares, 1/4 as likely to experience frequent seizures of fear, and half as likely to have feelings of low self-worth and lonesomeness. So I don't know. I mean, is that just related to this tough love thing? Who knows? On to the next section, part 6. I know I'm skipping way ahead here in the book, but like I said, there's a shitload of information in here, and if I was to, go word for word, we'd be here for a fucking month. So part 6 is ADHD, treatment with or without medication. Now, I found this pretty interesting. Back in the day, I heard a stat. Well, it might not have been a stat, but I heard something, and I kind of didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it at the time. But they said, I don't know, I can't remember where I heard it, but they said that in places like Paris and some of the Eastern European countries, they don't have ADHD. When they start showing signs of it, they send them to a psychologist and talk about things and figure out a pathway forward rather than medication. So, anyway, let's see here. There is a few questions that he asks in Chapter 28, the new neural crisis. So, did you know that 1 out of 10 American children have been diagnosed with ADHD, yet twice as many are boys? Did you know that 1 out of 9 American students seriously contemplate suicide every year, In just 3 decades, mental illness has increased 35-fold in America. Yet, as pointed out previously, teenage boys are 4 times more likely than teenage girls to actually commit suicide. Did you know that 1 out of 6 American children have a developmental disability? And on average, boys have twice as many learning disabilities. In addition, boys are dramatically falling behind girls when it comes to completing their education. More girls will graduate from high school, and twice as many women will graduate from college as compared to men. Very interesting section to me. I recently watched an Andrew Huberman podcast on dopamine function, and that is also mentioned in this section, is what made it kind of click for me. So I have a couple of tabs, or a marked page here. Let me just find it. 3, 2, here we go. The inhibited, this is what I'm kind of trying to relate to the Huberman podcast here. The inhibited dopamine function that gives rise to ADHD derails this natural process. To varying degrees, it creates a chronic imbalance in brain function that inhibits normal self-expression and development. By restoring normal dopamine function, our children are able to freely express, develop, and shift between their natural temperaments according to what is appropriate to the different circumstances in their lives. There are many ways to restore a healthy dopamine function, but we can't dive headlong into a solution without first exploring the many contributing factors that give rise to inhibited dopamine function. And in the next section, I'm actually going to list off, right, because there's, what does it say here, 16 possible causes or what's the word I'm looking for here? Well, whatever, causes. So it almost seems, from what this book and that Huberman podcast have been kind of telling me, is that dopamine inhibition, like inhibited dopamine function. Wow, I'm having issues today, guys. Maybe it's because it's my first time back. So inhibited dopamine function and ADHD are very similarly almost one and the same. So chapter 30 here, like I said, he goes on to list off basically all of the 16 possible contributing factors. Number 1, acetaminophen. Fever suppressants and cold, flu, allergy, painkillers like Tylenol, Nyquil, and Vicodin, all of which contain acetaminophen, inhibit dopamine function. In the long run, acetaminophen's use has been linked to the brain's inability to restore normal dopamine production. Goes on to even talk about how use of Tylenol when you are pregnant can leach into the womb. Number 2, too much mercury or MSG and not enough zinc, so a zinc deficiency. Sugar. Should we be shocked by this? Sugar. Excess consumption of soft drinks, bread, cookies, chips, ice cream, cakes, pudding, and the like elevates blood sugar levels. High blood sugar levels cause injury to the brain, contributing to low dopamine function by damaging brain neurons and creating chronic inflammation throughout the brain. Unfermented soy and pasteurized dairy, a sedentary lifestyle. So this is a huge one in my opinion. There's a section in here where he mentions that, I think, what is the number? 30% of American people are not fit for duty for the military. just on basic obesity. Number 6 is chronic stress. Number 7 is stimulant drugs and ADHD medication. A myriad of brain scans research has proved that excessive dopamine stimulation from street drugs like cocaine, crack, heroin, and methamphetamines change and injure the brain. Similar changes take place in the brain from prescribed stimulant drugs for ADD and ADHD. Most parents are unaware of the similarity of the ADHD drugs to illegal street drugs like cocaine and meth. Ritalin, a commonly prescribed ADHD drug, and cocaine act in the brain through the same pathways. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't know, I'm probably wrong, so never mind. Another little tab here. Adderall, which is slightly different, acts in the brain a similar way to methamphetamines or crystal meth. Okay, so that's kind of what I was going to say, but yeah, thought I was wrong. The abuse of street drugs and binge drinking of alcohol happens less today in universities because students now have access to legally prescribed ADHD drugs. 50 to 60% of college kids take Ritalin or Adderall. The use of ADHD stimulant drugs is also considered by many to be a gateway drug that increases the potential of teens to move on to more serious illegal drugs. And in bold here, between 30 and 50% of adolescents in drug rehab centers have used Ritalin. Wow. So, what I'm getting out of that right there is, let's do our fucking damnedest to not dope these kids up and try to find the most natural way to overcome this stuff. On to number 8, video games. Right? Again, it's that instant dopamine, that instant gratification. Induced labor, absent parenting and boundary enforcement, pornography, antibiotics, GMOs, pesticides, and plastics. Let's see here. Plastics, actually, I've got underlined here again. Just kind of reminds me, there's a Rogan podcast. I'm not exactly sure which number it is. I wish I had been able to find it. But he had a doctor on, and they were talking about how plastics are actually doing significant damage to male reproduction, basically sterilizing us. Where am I here? So, number 13 was gluten intolerance and other food sensitivities. Number 14 is toxicity in general. Now that could be neurotoxins or substances that interact with our nerve cells in the brain and throughout the body by overstimulating nerves to death or interrupting their communication process. Neurotoxins are particularly dangerous when we don't have enough glutathione or minerals that protect the brain. Number 15, just general nutritional deficiencies. And number 16 is brain concussions or mild traumatic brain injury. And those are basically the 16 leading causes to for ADHD. So my tab number 17 here, I'm just going to read tab 16, I'm just going to read a quick little headline and hit a bit of the book here, and I'll get right back to you guys. So, increased exercise can reverse symptoms of ADHD. One of the most obvious contributing factors that cause ADHD in children is lack of exercise. Challenging physical exercise and new movements of the body are proven to create the most dramatic and positive changes in the brain. He also goes on to say that grades go up with supervised physical education. This is going to be a little bit of a section here that I'm just going to give a quick read. Other research has demonstrated that with increased supervised exercise at school, grades go up and behavior dramatically improves. In Urban Dove Charter School administrators collected the lowest performing students from other schools and helped them become high achieving students throughout the use of physical activity. During the first 3 hours of the day, the curriculum included specific supervised physical exercises and competitive sports. The children were also mentored later in the day between academic classes by their gym coaches with whom they had formed a bond. The results were miraculous. 98% of the children graduated from high school and 90% went on to college. Before intervention, not one of the children had been expected to graduate from high school or attend college. The success of this program does not mean that every child just needs more exercise, nor does it mean that the absence of exercise is primarily the cause of ADHD, but it does show that our children, particularly those with learning challenges, have tremendous untapped potential that can be tapped by more physical activity. As part of a holistic approach combined with other non-drug solutions, a more moderate exercise program than the program used at Urban Dove may be equally effective. I've always kind of been a firm believer of that, is that exercise is a big help. And I can see it just in my own mental health, you know. I don't know if I've got ADD or ADHD. I'm sure this day and age I probably would have been diagnosed with it when I was a kid too. But I find that just for myself, when I can get out here and hit the gym, I definitely just feel better. So I got a couple more spots here that I'm gonna just kind of quickly read out, a couple small little points, and we'll get to wrapping it up here, guys. All right, if you're still with me, thank you. Again, like I said, I haven't done a book report in over 20 years, so let's see. This is his conclusion section. So like I said, I'm just going to read a couple small points. Being needed to serve creates a sense of purpose. Being served creates a sense of entitlement. Most parents know this intellectually, but our own need to be needed seduces us into serving our sons rather than teaching him to serve, which contributes to our son's purposefully. Boys who become a failure to launch are most frequently devoid of the two P's, purpose and postponed gratification. Boys devoid of the two P's are also, devoid of the equal checks and balances of the other two. P.S. to parents. P.S. to parents. When your son is dad enriched, he not only avoids the crisis of being dad deprived, but is inspired with the mission to become a great dad. And then this last section here, the solution to a problem created by a solution. The evidence of the boy crisis among all 63 of the largest developed nations makes it clear that the problem is not you as a parent or a teacher. Ironically, the problem started with a solution. The solution to ensuring our survival. Enough economic luxury for a nation to be labeled developed led to more freedom to divorce, which led to millions of boys being raised either with no father involvement, minimal father involvement, or conditional father involvement. Unlike a boy who loses his father in war and idolizes him as a hero, divorce does not leave a boy idolizing his dad as a hero. Although a boy whose father is a warrior sees his father lose his life, he feels inspired with a sense of purpose. A boy who envisions being a dad, but sees less of his dad after a divorce, sees his future a purpose void. The freedom to divorce, in combination with the freedom to have children without getting married, together create an unacknowledged worldwide gap. The gap between the dad-deprived boy and the dad-enriched boy. Fortunately, there is a solution. That solution has two pillars. First, knowing that men who are the sole breadwinners and have the poorest psychological health and the poorest physical health among men, and that both their psychological and physical health are the poorest during the years they earn the most, and of course, sole breadwinner dads feel the most pressure to earn the most. Second, knowing that women who share the financial burden feel psychologically healthier. In brief, one solution is sharing the caring. And if there is a divorce, we have seen the four must-dos to secure the continuation of sharing the caring, and witnessed why these must-dos are a prerequisite to children doing as well as they would in an intact family. Because your son's genes are half his biological dad's, and because he sees his dad in himself, reflected in himself every time he looks in the mirror, nothing can fully substitute for his biological dad. Yet, we have seen how we can most effectively employ the energies of stepdads, grandparents, coaches, and organizations like My Brother's Keeper, or I guess Big Brothers, and the Boy Scouts, cumulatively help bridge the gap between boys who are dad deprived and boys who are dad enriched. So, sort of a not so quick overview of the book. Trust me, I barely made a dent, and the amount of information and perspective that he shares is, again, like I said, if you've got boys, get a copy of the book. Fathers, you know, I've said it numerous times on the podcast. We need to get our acts together and lead from the front. You know, the ones that are, obviously I'm not talking to you, but the guys that are just sitting around, not fucking doing the work, you're part of the problem. It's because of boys like you that we're living in today's society of weak men. It's up to strong men to fix it. You know, I keep saying that. I know I'm up for it. Hopefully you guys are up for it too. Anyway, that's going to be pretty much it. Like I said, I don't really like hearing myself talk, and this one was my first one back after a few months. So anyway, enough of that shit. If you got anything out of this episode, if it made you think, you know, I'm going to pull a Frisella here, but if it made you think, if it made you laugh, I don't think any of that would have made you laugh. It was a pretty serious episode, but if you got anything out of it, man, give it a like, give it a share. We'll see you next time. Out.